like I brought it to the studio and a bunch of people were like, oh my God, what is that? Can I have one? And then we're just like, I guess. And then what really kind of changed it into a business is we posted a picture on Instagram, and then like it kind of just like blew up where it's like, all right, I guess like we have to do this now.
Hello, yogis, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dharma Talk. I'm your host, Henry Winslow, and this is episode number 66. This week, it's my pleasure to share with you an interview with my friend Dov Vargas, also known as Yogi Varuna. Apart from being the son of Sri Dharma Mittra, Dov is also an accomplished and enthusiastic and celebrated yogi in his own right. He's also the founder of a major product that has taken the world by storm, the Dharma Yoga Wheel. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But first, I wanted to share with you an email that I received about the podcast. One listener wrote in, "First, I want to tell you that I am very grateful to you for your podcasts. They have been an absolute wealth of information and support. I have had a solid home practice for 3 years doing my asana every day. I have only ever had about 5 lessons with a teacher, and so I have had so many questions that I am now finding are being answered by your podcast. Since listening, I have incorporated more meditation and mantra, and I feel like I am part of a community of like-minded people, one I didn't know how much I was missing by always practicing alone. It would not be an exaggeration to say that all your hard work in producing such an amazing podcast has changed the face of my personal practice for the better. I love the format and especially listening to how others practice. That's my favorite question, so thank you very much. I appreciate all you do." Wow, receiving a message like that really just touches my heart, and that's what it's all about. If this podcast can create a community where a physical community can't exist for you for whatever reason, if this creates that sense of connectedness, that sangha, then it's doing all I ever dreamed for it and more. So thank you so much for writing that in. That is a powerful message, and I really appreciate you too. Now back to this week's scheduled programming. Here's a little bit of what you can expect from my conversation with Dov. He talks about growing up surrounded by yoga as a child, and then later making the conscious decision to practice, teach, and live yoga as an adult. He talks about grappling with seeing his father as both a family member and a teacher. And when we discuss his personal practice, he shares a little bit about psychic development techniques and why they are mostly kept secret. And lastly, we get into the story of the Dharma Yoga Wheel, the origin of that business, and creating it out of duty rather than intention, and some difficult lessons he learned along the way from shrewd, competitive business. All that's coming up very soon. Please just stay tuned through these announcements, and we'll dive into my interview with Dov Vargas. Hi, yogis. I've got lots of events coming up in the near and distant future, and you can find the details and registration for all of them at henrywins.com/events. But for this week, I just want to highlight one that's coming up very soon that's near and dear to my heart. This coming Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m., at 3 Jewels in East Village of Manhattan, I'm hosting a donation-based vinyasa class to benefit Woodstock Sanctuary. Woodstock Sanctuary is an animal rescue shelter in upstate New York that saves animals from certain death in slaughterhouses and industrial farming situations, gives them a home for life. What they're doing is really important work, and I'm happy to support them. I hope that you can too. So if you're in the New York area, come on by 3 Jewels on July 10th. That's a Wednesday at 6 p.m. And you can make a donation, whatever you feel comfortable and capable of donating to support this worthy cause. Now, for all the other events, please go to henrywins.com/events and sign up. What's your purpose? What's your vision? What mark will you leave on this planet long after you're gone? I'm Henry Winslow, and you're listening to Dharma Talk, the only podcast where I interview inspirational yogis on how they're changing the world in their own unique ways. Whether you're still searching for your purpose or already walking the path, I hope these stories get you excited to live your Dharma. Hello, Dharma Talk community, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I've got my buddy Dov on the line. Dov Vargas, also known as Yogi Varuna, was born into a family of yogis. As the son of Sri Dharma Mittra, he has been teaching and practicing yoga for over 9 years. In 2014, Dov created the Dharma Yoga Wheel with his business partner, Raquel Vamos. Together, they have developed and inspired the now popular Wheel Yoga. Dov, so awesome to have you on the show today. How's it going?
It's going good. Just did some grounding on the beach, and I'm happy to join you today and share everything.
Well, I apologize for taking you out of nature and throwing you back into technology, but I appreciate you coming on the show. That's awesome. I'm glad you were able to get out there on the beach. We always
Yeah,
start with
no
the
worries.
same first question, so I'm going to throw that out there for you. The first question is, what does the word Dharma mean to you, and what is your Dharma as you understand it today?
Okay. Well, obviously, besides Dharma being my dad, um, Dharma for me is just it's kind of like your just that calling inside of you that brings you like wants you to go outside of this matrix that we're currently living in, and this search of the truth, whether it's just like understanding who you are and kind of just understanding the nature of us as human beings, in this experience of life that we're in. And upon learning it, and then you feel kind of compelled to share it to people who you feel are ready for that deeper truth, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good point about sharing, and that is not something that everyone brings up. Do you feel that sharing your own journey or your own understanding is a part of everyone's dharma?
um in a sense, yes. Of course, a lot of it's hard to kind of open people up if they're not ready. So the way I see it is, I wouldn't hold back in what I want to say. It's just a matter of whether it resonates with that person or not. And I can't really have any expectations onto, where that, um, where sharing it will lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you quickly mentioned that your dad's name is Dharma, and I don't want to gloss over that. So, what was it like to grow up surrounded by yoga when you were like as early as you can remember? Were you already introduced to yoga, or is it something that you came across when you were ready, when you were more receptive to it?
Well, there was like different points in my life where it had different meanings, but basically in the beginning, like I remember going to Yogi Gupta, which is my dad's guru from India. My parents would bring me to like his discourse and kirtans when I was super young, and I just kind of remember sitting there with all these disciples, being like 5 or 6, and just kind of not really knowing where you are, but you're like, okay, I'm here, and I don't really know what this guy's saying, but he's decked out in these, nice orange robes, and had a really nice, like, cool, like, calm voice that was very comforting. But other than that, I was obviously like put into poses and kind of like dressed up like a little yogi kid, and
Yeah.
and I think like the big things that were kind of weird for me growing up was like because I was raised vegan, and back when I was growing up, like veganism, even vegetarianism was it was just not popular at all. And, kids were like, oh, what are you going to eat? What are you eating? And just being in the lunchroom, and I would actually couldn't eat pretty much any of the food, and the teachers would come up and be like, why aren't you eating? And I was very shy, and I just be like, I can't eat any of this. But
Mm-hmm.
And then I think around 2010-ish, I like started working at the desk at my parents' studio, and then I really started to see like what like my dad was doing, and really seeing like how these people would treat him with like all this respect and reverence. And from that point I was like, oh, like this is something like legit, like what's going on here. And eventually I decided to do the 200-hour teacher training. And at that point I kind of had this I guess like breakthrough where I could differentiate my dad as my dad and this like teacher. And I kind of saw him for who he was to these people, and then kind of mix that together with him just being my dad.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Lots of interesting stuff to dig deeper on. So that's interesting. You were working at the yoga studio before you had a, I'll say, explicit practice, because of course, you were surrounded by the yoga. You were participating in kirtans at age 5. You were eating a vegan diet, but you didn't have a practice per se, right?
Yeah, not at all.
Right. Yeah. So was it difficult for you to, at first, to step into that role of humility, to take the teacher training and be amongst a group of other people who looked at your father with this sort of reverence, whereas you saw him as, this is my dad? How was that experience for you?
um I did a training that was in Israel, so it was a little bit different because I didn't really know those people, so it was a little bit easier to kind of just jump in as like more of just another random student. But even so, like there's a lot of, whether it was just me in my head, a lot of like pressure being, this guy's son, and I'm supposed to be flexible and all these things. And in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, it was it was a really hard thing to go through. And having all this extra attention and energy on you. And for me, my personality, I don't really like to be in the spotlight or want to be the center of attention, and I don't want any special treatment. So
Hmm.
it was definitely a challenge, and it definitely made me stronger, but it was not easy, I would say.
I see. So this was not the life of a yogi training. It was, you made the choice to go somewhere else.
Well, it was just like in a different destination. It was just like the same thing, but hosted in
Gotcha.
Israel. Yeah.
Gotcha. When you were working at the desk of the studio and you saw these students, disciples, looking at your father in a certain way, did you see that and think, I want that? Or what was it about that changed your perception around yoga and the gravity of it?
Um, I didn't want it for like myself, but I wanted to kind of experience like what they were, to kind of understand, why are they, looking to my dad for all this information, and why is he
Mm,
at the position he is. So that kind of created a curiosity where I wanted to go see like what's really going on here.
right. I got you. So it was more curiosity around being the student than being the teacher.
Yeah, I mean, going in there, I had really had no intention of teaching. It was like for that training, it was my mom was like, if you want to go to Israel, you kind of have to do the training. It was like a little bit of like an ultimatum. So, and I was just like, all right, sure, I'm going to a different country, whatever. And then, obviously just being in that training with, that energy, that it kind of just pulled me deep into it, where after it, I was like, you know what, like maybe I'm supposed to do this. Maybe, there's something more to it. And I was much more open to it.
Yeah, right. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like to grow up vegan. I mean, was it something that was it so normalized that you didn't even consider the alternative, or was the compassion toward living beings something that was important to you at that time?
Yeah, I mean, as there was a lot of the compassion involved. Like my dad would always, have pets around and always talk about, don't hurt the animals, make them feel comfortable, make them feel safe, give them love. So I was always, I grew up with like a bunch of dogs, a bunch of cats, and rabbits, hamsters, etc. So I always had this love for animals, and I would never, think about hurting or eating them. And the only times that would really become a question is more so like when my friends were like, "Oh, we're going to McDonald's or whatever," and I'm just like, I can't, what am I going to eat? French fries or something? And they would
Hmm.
like ask me like, "Oh, don't you want to eat this?" And I would just be like, "No, I don't have a desire for it." You know.
Yeah, it's interesting because many children grow up and they are so disconnected from, myself included. I'm vegan now, but it's a fairly recent development, like less than 1 year. But growing up, you don't even think about the fact that what is on your plate was once a living animal. And if more people were conscious of that, I think it would be much more common. And that's happening now. It is much more common to choose to not eat animal products.
Yeah, definitely. We're very like desensitized sort to it because we know we just see it in like a burger patty, in between buns and advertised to be, juicy and tasty and all that you don't really even, you know, correlate that to like, oh, that's a living cow that, had to be killed and this and that. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So you're obviously still practicing veganism as part of your yoga practice. I would consider it to be, at least. But what else
Yeah.
does your yoga practice include? Talk me through what you do um, to practice yoga on a daily basis.
Um so for the physical part, the asana, I usually do that, during my dad's class, to just take his master class or whatever class it is. Other than that, in the morning, I usually like to wake up and I like to do psychic development, which is a special kind of like psychic training pranayama formula that was passed down from my dad's guru that basically, creates some mental clarity and also allows you to kind of just, I guess, like be more in touch with kind of the flow of the universe, where you kind of set these intentions and kind of will things to come into fruition, so to speak. And that practice is like one of my favorite things. And ever since I started doing it, you really can kind of notice the change in yourself. And then, of course, in everything that happens throughout your life. So that's like one of the main things I like to do, and I always try to do that. If it's just going to be that, then I'm happy with that. If I can, I like to just do a little bit of pranayama and just like to sit and meditate, even if it's just for 10 minutes.
I would love to learn more about that psychic development. I'm if that becomes available again soon, I'm gonna have to stop in because I've heard about that from several of the people who've gone through the Life of a Yogi training through the 800 hour, and yeah, that's cool stuff.
Oh yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's like secret, like, like very, I don't know how to explain it, but it's super powerful.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that keeping the secrecy around certain practices preserves their power, um, or is it just like, is that important? Is the secretness an important part of keeping it sacred?
Um, I think for me, I would say it's more of just like, it's one of those things where, let's say you want to teach it, you really have to be you have to be grounded and you have to have, a certain level of practice, because, you don't want to open up certain psychic channels, in a bad space, or it's just something that you don't want to just do. You want to be prepared. You want to know what you're doing. You want to create a safe space to do it. And then there's also like how I was saying, how you kind of will things into your life. You don't want to use that for anything like that's not, I don't want to use the words good or bad, but you don't want to use it to like, oh, I'm going to do this practice so I can like get the winning lottery ticket and make lots of money, which,
Mm-hmm.
could happen because you don't necessarily know who's going to take it and what their intentions are. So I think by
Right.
it being more secretive and more of like something you have to work towards, that it at that point, if you're really going towards it, you shouldn't have those intentions, I guess.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's partially a protection mechanism to keep people from um, using it incorrectly, and also it's also a safeguard for everyone else, so that you're not like basically like casting black magic spells.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Well, let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about the Dharma Yoga Wheel. How did that come to be? Where did the idea come from, and why did you make the choice to actually put your energy and effort into bringing it to life?
Okay. So yeah, it's an interesting story. It was like about, I would say like 20, maybe 20 plus years ago. My dad was walking around in Chinatown, and there was like this plastic store of some sort, and they were basically like throwing pieces of scrap plastic out, and it was just basically like a plexiglass like cylinder that was cut almost the same dimensions as the current wheel, but a little bit different. And I guess Dharma like took it and he kind of just had it. And I'm not sure because I wasn't really involved at that time what he was doing with it, but it was basically when I was around just sitting in the closet in the yoga studio. And one day I was just in class. I came a little bit early to warm up, and I like open the closet, and there's like blocks there, etc. And then I see this like clear wheel thing, and I'm like, what the hell is this? So I kind of like break it out, and I just start rolling like my back on it, and I'm just like, oh shit, like this thing feels great, like. And then and then from there I just like every day I would come early and start kind of rolling around on it, and by just kind of just like playing and using my intuition, I started like figuring out these poses. And at that time, like other students who were coming into class would kind of like look at me and be like, oh, what is that? And I'd be like, some kind of wheel. And then they would just kind of be like, oh, can I use it? And that is like after like a couple weeks, there would be like a queue of like people waiting to get the wheel. So I'd be like, shit, I got to come here even earlier so I can get my chance to use it. And and then from there, like I really had no intentions of starting a business or any of that. I was just like, after it kind of, like I said, got a lot of people wanted to use it, I was like, all right. And my business partner, Raquel, we were like, all right, we need to, get one of these and just like make one so we can have one at home to use and practice with. So we,
So, wait, so how did Raquel come into the picture? Did she see everything that was happening and be like, we got to make a business, like we have to make more of these?
um, well, at the time we were dating, and so we would
Okay.
come to class together, and she was there when we first started, playing around with it together, and we were just kind of both like, this thing feels great. We don't, really know what it is, but we want one of those to have at home. So we didn't have any intentions of like starting a business. It was just like, I just want this thing so I could use it selfishly, I guess.
Yeah, and everybody else is taking it, so we need more of them.
Yeah, exactly. And so she had a student at that time who was he was like a an artist who made things out of wood. And she was like, oh, we can ask this guy, maybe he can make us something. Because, oh, actually, we actually found the plastic store in Chinatown. When we went there, we're like, oh, this is even better. We're just gonna go see if we can get the same thing. And we went there, and like we actually found something. It was like a cylinder, but it was super thin. It was like, I don't know, maybe like an eighth of a centimeter thick. And at the time, we were just like so happy to actually like have this thing in our hands that we paid $200 for this like little piece of plastic. And like
Mm.
walking down the block, I'm already thinking in my head, I'm like, there's no way this can support any weight. Like it's literally just gonna crack the second we lay on it. But we were like, we're not gonna, try to return it or anything. So we we decided to go with this guy who made um, wooden art, and he was like, oh yeah, I can definitely do that. So we kind of switched up the dimensions a little bit because the wheel was a little bit too wide. So when we rolled on it, it would kind of go over our shoulder blades. So we wanted it to kind of fit more in between, which we just thought was, a little bit better. So we gave him the dimensions, and then he made us this like, it looked like a piece of art, and we used to sell them, but this really cool wooden wheel, and it had like this lip on it where you can kind of wrap your fingers around and grip onto it. And we had that, and we're like, all right, this is really awesome. And we like I brought it to the studio, and a bunch of people were like, oh my god, what is that? Can I have one? And then we're just like, I guess. So we're like, all right, we'll go back to the guy who made it, and we'll be like, hey, can you just like make us 10? And then we like got 10 made, and then we like few of our buddies at the center who wanted them, we just like, all right, here we didn't really make any money, we just charged them whatever the guy charged us. And then what really kind of changed it into a business is we posted a picture on Instagram, and then like it kind of just like blew up, where it's like, what is that, I want one, blah blah blah. And then we're like, all right, I guess like we have to do this now.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So at that point, what's going through your head? Are you thinking like, oh, I don't want to do this? Or are you thinking like, cool, I mean, there's an opportunity here, or this is like my obligation. I have like a duty to serve all these people who are interested. Like what, what took you to the next step?
It was a mixture of things. I guess the first one just being like, I'm like a very like giving person, so like I just felt like obligated, like, these people want this thing, like if I already have a means to do it, I might as well, help them get what they want. And one side of me was just like, just kind of like just go with it, where I was just like, I'm just gonna go with the flow of, the universe, and if it wants me to like make these wheels and like whatever, that's what I'm gonna do. And me me and my partner, we don't have like any business experience. Like I didn't, I went to high school, that's about it. She went to college, but nothing for business. So we just like kind of just like rolled with it, no pun intended.
Yeah. And so you started with the wooden one. Obviously, once you scaled it out and wanted to serve all these people who were liking the photo on Instagram, you needed to go to another level of production. So, what did you do?
Yeah, so the wood ones, they were like, it just like a lot of effort to make them. Like I said, they were like almost like pieces of art. And we, it cost us like almost like $80 for the guy charged us to make one. So we had to charge like, 100, $125 so we could, sustain. And then, some people were like, oh, it's too slippery, or the wood, it hurts my back, and this and that. So we're like, okay, like there has to be another way that we can do this and make it a little bit more practical. So we were like, oh, we can put a yoga mat on top. And then we were like, we we knew that they had those like PVC pipes or whatever. So we're like, maybe we can try that. So we like went back to the guy, and we're like, maybe you can get this pipe, cut them down, buffer them and make them smooth, and then we can throw this yoga mat on top, and then that'll kind of make, kind of please everyone and make it a little bit easier and definitely more affordable. So that was kind of like the next step, which kind of just made everything easier. And, of course, it was also a headache in itself,
Yeah.
trying to figure
That
out.
that was back with that was the original guy in Chinatown again.
No, this is back the art guy, because
Oh, okay.
he just, yeah, he already had kind of like a workspace. So we're just like, we obviously want to work with you. You helped us do this, so we kind of like wanted to be loyal to him, and of course,
Hmm.
help each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, eventually, so it sounds like you started to be able to produce these more at scale and serve all these people who are interested, and it kind of took on a life of its own. And now you're teaching all sorts of different yoga wheel classes, and it's kind of become its own kind of style or class of yoga unto itself. How did that come about, and do you feel that like what is your feeling on it growing outside of you and Raquel, and touching all these other people in ways that you no longer control?
Yeah. So, um, throughout the process of all this, I was always playing on it. So, after, I don't know how much time, but we kind of figured out, maybe like 20, 30 poses that we can do on it. And then I kind of put together a little, like, kind of like makeshift poster, kind of like an omen to my dad's like big 908 chart. And I started to make like a little sequence. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try to teach this. And of course, I'm like super scared because I don't know what I'm doing. And it's, I'm not just using my body. Now I have to like control this like little wheel and make everything flow and do all this stuff. But I convinced my mom. I was like, let me give me a slot and I'll try to like teach this class and see what happens. And at the beginning, it was like, at least from my perspective, it was like terrible, but I'm sure it wasn't as bad. But, I was just kind of just trying to see what happens. And then
Mhm.
after a few months, I was like, okay. And then I started to see what worked and started to create this little sequence and kind of an idea of what should be in the class. And of course, we wanted to kind of um, keep it with the Dharma lineage. So we wanted to, of course, have like the oming in the beginning of the class. We wanted to have all those main poses where it was like spinal twist, headstand, shoulder stand. So we wanted to create those elements and shavasana and everything, so it would mimic and give praise to Dharma, where you know I started and learned everything, and I wanted to make it as close as I could to that. And as for the second part of the question, so in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty, I guess, disappointing, because a lot of the a lot of these companies that in the beginning they would just like copied almost like exactly what we're doing. Like it was like the same exact wheel with the same exact, almost like the same exact logo, except they would change like the D to like an L or something, and they would be like, "Oh, we created this wheel and this and that. Get it from us." Blah blah blah. So it was a little bit um, hurtful in the beginning, just to see that, especially it's like, oh, I put so much time and effort into creating this, and kind of we like created the market and there's all this demand for it. And then all of a sudden, everyone was kind of taking credit for what we did. And we kind of went through like a little sad stage. And, through that process, where you know, realizing, it's not to practice non-attachment. It's like we didn't really create this. It's the universe that brought this to us to kind of just facilitate it. And, we just came to terms with it, where it's like, even if, let's say, we're not selling all of them and doing this, we at least created this tool that whether it's coming from us or not, it's helping to help these people open up their hearts and their backs and just helping them to feel good, you know.
Yeah, that's a good attitude to have, but I'm sure that was a challenge. Even if you have all of that psychic development work to, prepare yourself to go with the flow of the universe. Yeah, you put in effort, you put in energy, you kind of like you struggled to create this thing that people really appreciated. Um, but I still, you see the Dharma Yoga Wheel everywhere. I think people still recognize, at least at this point, maybe because it's had staying power, that it is, the original, the gold standard. Are there still any of those original wooden ones kicking around, like collector's edition?
Oh yeah, I mean, in my apartment, I have like kind of like all the, not all, but like most of the models where it's like from the wood one to like the original plexiglass one to like more of the newer ones now. But the wood one is still like my favorite, and I wish we can bring them back. And maybe we will, like maybe like a small batch, but we would have to talk about it. But I think it would be like a cool thing to kind of
Yeah,
let people
totally.
experience it.
Did the wooden ones also have the matte surface?
No, it was just pretty much straight wood.
Straight up wood,
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the emergence of the competitors, but maybe it was something else. Tell me what was your biggest lesson from the whole saga of the Dharma Yoga Wheel, and what was the main takeaway?
Um, I guess I had a lot of expectations at that time for the yoga community. I guess like I kind of had this idea that since we're all on this path, we're all kind of understanding and having the same kind of moral compass and stuff like that. And then kind of through that process, seeing where these other yogis or whatever you want to call it were just like stealing and kind of just profiting off of our idea and stuff like that, then it kind of just made us like re-evaluate what was going on and just realizing that it's not so much them, it was just our perception on like what we expected this community to be. And there was a certain point when all that stuff was going on, I almost like took a step back from yoga entirely because I almost blamed a few people's actions for like the collective whole of this practice. And I actually, think it was good that I went through that because now I like really can appreciate everything and just understand that, like Dharma says, like expectations are one of the main causes of pain and suffering.
Mm, yeah. What do you mean by feeling that like this I'm trying to resist using words like bad and good too, but this problem that you perceived in the yoga community at large around not, really living the yoga in action through their ethical choices. What do you mean by you wanted to point that at one or two people?
Oh no, I mean I meant like I ended up they kind of those few exceptions kind of tainted my
I see.
idea of the whole, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's easy to see your perspective of what's happening right in front of you and then try to like paint a wide brushstroke across everything because of something very immediate. But you're right, having an experience like that does give you new perspective, and it if it causes you to reflect and contemplate, then it's a useful tool, really.
Yeah, 100%. Like I wouldn't change anything. Everything kind of happened exactly as it should. You know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I see you leaning into the wheel, teaching the wheel workshops. I love taking your wheel class and your, your regular Dharma yoga class too. But it's cool to see you, mastering this thing that you brought into the world and sharing it with so much enthusiasm and love for it.
Yeah, I have to say I'm really grateful for it because it's hard for me because being my dad's son, sometimes you're expected like, oh, you're gonna continue doing like taking over what my dad started, and it's nice to have something that I can kind of say is my own that I created and kind of can really it just really comes from me if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. What's one thing that you've got on the horizon or something that you're working on now that you're especially excited about that you'd like to share?
um we're working on a collapsible wheel, so basically like more of a travel friendly wheel that you can kind of take apart and put together, which would be super cool, because sometimes you want to like take your wheel somewhere and it's this kind of big, you know, bulky thing. And I think it would be nice to kind of offer it and allow people to kind of travel with it and just make it more accessible.
That's a great idea. And my 2 cents, get a patent on it.
Man, we tried. Like patents, they're not as black and white as it seems. Like
Yeah.
if you let's say you like if you make like a pen, let's say you patent a pen, if someone like literally like puts a little like dot or like an indentation in it, it won't count as like this as a violation. So like even the most.
Totally new design.
Yeah,
You didn't see that we put the bump on the bottom.
yeah, exactly. So, and then there's the whole thing with like international, and like what really hurt us was like China, when China copied our
Oh yeah.
product, because there's different.
They can do it for like $2.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, for that we kind of already know what's gonna happen. Like we're gonna get copied, but it is what it is. You can't really, as long as we're bringing it into the world and trying to do what we want to do, that's all we
Right.
can do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you've taken that truism from your dad about expectations and kind of flipped it around. It's like you can expect now the negative consequences, if you want to call them that. And if you're prepared for that and you still make the choice to move forward, then nothing can hurt you.
Totally, yeah.
So apart from getting your message out on the podcast, what are you doing today to live your Dharma?
Today.
Today.
Oh, okay. Today I just needed to kind of recharge my own batteries to kind of allow me to help share. So for me that was like grounding. So I grew up in New York City and pretty much spent most of my life there. And I'm living on the 10th floor, so disconnected from the ground, disconnected from nature. So I just really wanted to use this this weekend to kind of get out into nature, reconnect, be away from all the Wi-Fi radiation, all the electricity, the people, just all the chaos, and kind of recharge myself so that when I come back in next week and I have to teach, I can teach from a full gas tank.
Right on. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a great way to spend Memorial Day weekend. I'll be at your class on Tuesday at noon, so I'll see you there after you're totally recharged. Now
Cool,
is
man.
the perfect time to we'll segue into the final section of this interview. I can't let you go without hitting the prana round. Okay, so in the prana round, I'm going to ask you 6 rapid fire questions and ask you to answer in minimum 1 word, maximum 1 sentence. Okay?
All right, let's do this.
In 1 word, why do you practice yoga?
Freedom.
What's your favorite yoga pose and why?
Vasisthasana. It just makes you feel really solid and grounded.
You do. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's true for everyone.
that's a good point.
What's the single best cue or piece of advice that you've ever received from a teacher?
Maybe just I really only have one teacher, which is my dad, and there's so many quotes. Just to bring your attention back to your um, third eye, I guess.
Yeah, that's always a good one. Recommend one book, either modern or ancient, for our listeners.
This book by Yogi Gupta, Swami Kalashananda, Yoga and Yogic Powers.
Yoga and Yogic Powers by
Yeah.
Yogi Gupta. Okay. Is yoga for everyone?
Definitely.
All right. Last question. How can our audience get in touch with you, and how can we support you in your Dharma?
You guys can reach me on Instagram or Facebook. Just search for Yogi Varuna. I'm always happy to help ask questions. There you can also find my teaching schedule. And yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone and everyone.
Awesome. Dov, thank you so much for taking a break from your nature grounding for Memorial Day weekend. It was a blast talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. We can continue the conversation then.
Cool, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, Dharma Talk community. If you enjoyed this podcast and you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button right now. And if you'd like to show your support even more, leave me an honest review on iTunes or whatever podcast directory you listen on. You can also make a financial contribution to keep the show up and running, a donation at henrywins.com. And remember, I'm here to serve you. So if you have any questions or comments or ideas, you can always reach me on Instagram at henrywins. Otherwise, I'll speak to you next week. Keep living your Dharma.